Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's Industry Insights. I'm your host, Leah Troscianecki, and I am joined today by a very special guest of mine, Alan Baptista. We are bringing you coast-to-coast action today. Alan is joining us from California. Thank you so much for getting up a little early for us today, Alan.
Absolutely. It's a pleasure. Thank you very much for having me.
Absolutely. And we are really excited to chat with you all today because Alan and I have had the privilege of working with Henry Balthazar over at 451 Research over the last few months to get a better understanding of what organizations are looking for as they look to modernize their data protection solutions. So if you and your team are thinking about any kind of upgrades or an analysis of your data protection strategies and identifying any kind of capability gaps you may have, hopefully this show is going to help you out. We will also have our production team post a link to the full report in the chat, which you can get free from Veeam. So we're really excited to share that resource for you as a 2024 Enterprise Buyer's Guide for Data Protection Solutions. But we'll highlight some of the top insights from that report on today's show. Before I do that, just a few housekeeping items. If you haven't tuned in with us before, what we do is we love to hear from you all where you're calling in from. As I said, Alan is joining us from California. I am in Ohio, where of course I am a big fan of the Ohio State University Buckeyes. I would love to hear from you all where you're calling in from. If you're in the United States, drop a comment in whatever platform you're joining us from, including X. We are now back on X in case anyone had been tuning in on the X platform previously. So drop a comment in where you're tuning in from, especially in the United States. If you have a favorite college football team or an NFL football team, let us know who your favorite team is in the chat. And then if you're joining us internationally, let us know where you're calling in from as well, because in a little bit, we are going to put up a map of where everybody is tuning in from. As we kind of broadcast this over several different platforms, I think it's fun to collate everything into one place. So we'll light that map up in green a little bit later in today's show. So again, drop that in the comments. But first, let's go ahead and kick off, Alan, and talk a little bit about some of these insights. And I want to go ahead and pull up the first part of this report, which was talking a bit about how you can use cloud technology within data protection solutions. Now, we figured we'd start with this because this should be old hat, but the idea here is that even though data protection vendors like Veeam have been talking about cloud-based solutions for a long time, there's still a big adoption curve, right? So it's really about how do we cross that chasm and figure out the right opportunities to use cloud in your environments. So just to kind of instantiate that claim here, 451 Research found in their Voice of the Enterprise survey for data protection that 67% of organizations have a cloud-based data protection solution in place. It's a pretty big gap, right? You think the cloud is ubiquitous, but it's still showing that a lot of folks aren't using cloud as a part of their data protection architectures. So we really think that's an important thing to talk about still. So how can you use cloud in the right way? Because I know a lot of organizations have a cloud first approach, but I've heard a lot of organizations talking about a cloud right approach. So Alan, let's talk a little bit about maybe what that right approach is. So first and foremost, again, table stakes here, data protection that facilitates hybrid cloud or cloud-only architectures are becoming a really popular solution. And of course, here at Veeam, we have a pretty big support system for cloud storage, whether it comes to partnering with the big hyperscalers like AWS, Azure, and Google Cloud, or partnering with any of our cloud service providers in our Veeam ecosystem. You want to talk a little bit about why, for enterprises especially, it's really important to be thinking about cloud storage in your environment?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And before we do that, I guess just kind of reverting back to that stat, that means that 2/3 of the organizations are looking to go cloud-based, but another third are still hybrid, are still on-prem. So it is a hybrid approach any way you look at it. Even if you have maybe you have a multitude of those different, a mix of on-prem and cloud. But to answer your question, most definitely, the data shows that disaster recovery is independent of where you are storing your data is extremely important, right? The workloads you're working on. The backups, the recovery, the data archiving is now really public. They're really using this cloud resources to serve as the kind of the 3-2-1 rule, right? As a remote location for you to store that redundancy aspect of the data that you're using. It's really important. So, but only 33% of the respondents show that on-prem are the deployment of factors. So that contrast with 42 that favor this hybrid cloud approach, in which smaller on-prem backup recovery repositories are mainly used as rapid recovery options in the cloud instances. So it's kind of an interesting piece of information that was brought up from that research.
Absolutely. And I think part of where that gap might be coming from is maybe not every organization is backing up their cloud hosted workloads. We know from trend analysis that there is higher propensity for using cloud services for production data or even software as a service applications. It stands to reason then that if they're not using the cloud as part of a backup strategy, then maybe they're not backing up those cloud workloads. So that's another kind of right fit solution to be thinking about. Are you backing up those cloud-based workloads? And if so, how are you doing that? It's definitely going to be cheaper to continue to back those up in the cloud environments in some way, shape, or form. But it's especially important.
And then another aspect as well.
Yeah.
I'm sorry to interrupt. But another aspect as well is for those that are looking at that remote recovery site, that they have to maintain their own resources and their own data centers, redundancy data centers and whatnot. Cloud is a good alternative that will simply will simplify that effort really in maintaining that cloud-based data protection offsite as an alternate option as well. So.
Definitely. I think that 3-2-1 rule, even though, again, we talk about it as old hat, but it's not always implemented in every environment. So, Alan, just as you said, having that remote capability is so key, especially as a way to turn up storage fast without needing to have a warm body in that secondary location. The other benefit of that is, of course, innovation on storage as the form factor, because something that's becoming really prevalent is immutable storage in that remote geographic location, right? And if you're leveraging the cloud for that, that can be a really great way to implement this new kind of form factor, this new style of storage for something that is security specific. So I think that's definitely a great outcome for organizations to be thinking about. And something that Veeam doesn't talk about quite a lot, but I think we're going to probably talk about it more, is this idea of ESG initiatives, right? So environmental, society, and governance policies. Cloud and data center providers oftentimes publish what their ESG stance is, and that can be a really great way as you're looking to innovate in your infrastructure to be thinking about alignment between infrastructure needs and organizational needs, taking a look at where those ESG pieces overlap. Anything else, Alan, you want to add on this cloud piece before we move on?
No, absolutely. I think that's a great way to, I think the ESG aspect is just kind of the cherry on top of everything, and organizations are definitely moving their data and workloads to these public clouds to meet those ESG strategies, environmental, social, and governance, that you take away that onus and that responsibility and are able to leverage just the sheer number and volume of your cloud providers to carry that. So 80% of the respondents really showed that they agree with that approach as well. So it's kind of an interesting stat that came from that report.
Definitely. And again, you can download that report free from Veeam. So again, we'll put the link to that in whatever the social platform you're tuning in from so that you can check out more of that research on your own. Before we move on to the next topic, I'd love to go ahead and throw up that map. So production team, if we can go ahead and put the map up to just show everybody where we're calling in from, that would be really lovely. For those of you guys who are joining us in the United States, I am again in Ohio. We have production based out of Texas, and then Alan is joining us from California. So keep letting us know in the chat where you're tuning in from. And then with that, we'll go ahead and come back to that map in just a little bit as we look to light it up a bit more. Our production team is letting us know where some of the folks from the chat are calling in from. So with that, let's go ahead and flip over to our next kind of outcome that this enterprise buyer's guide highlighted, which is really looking at backup and recovery as a critical function of cybersecurity and ransomware. So nice transition from ESG protocols into security protocols. This is a major trend and a major outcome that is affecting every single IT team. And backup and recovery administrators are no exception to that rule. And in fact, 451 research found that 29% of all outages reported in their voice of the enterprise came from ransomware, and that was the leading cause of outages from that research. So this is just becoming a tremendous impact on uptime, data recovery, even data loss. So Alan, bringing you back into this, I think when we talked with Henry a bit about what he's been seeing in the space, one of the things that's becoming a new trend is really not just thinking of backup as a recovery function, but actually looking at it as an opportunity to be proactive in your security protocols. You want to talk to us a little bit about that?
Absolutely. And I think attackers, we know, obviously know, and I'm stating the obvious here, but attackers are now seeking out those quasi-soft topic or perceived soft targets, which could be the administrator accounts or the backup data and other vulnerabilities, and that can definitely compromise the data we're trying to protect. So I think by organizations adopting kind of a zero trust principle allows for organizations to really create this strong foundation for the resilience practices. It provides this least privileged access that should limit organizations or the bad actors' organizations access to the various devices or applications that they're really trying to reach. So it's very it's a cat and mouse game, I guess, in terms of the security aspect. So you cover one end and it opens up another aspect of areas that you need to cover. So taking this proactive zero trust approach, I think, is paramount for organizations to be successful in the whack-a-mole of security that you're kind of hitting up against always.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that whack-a-mole concept should ring true for so many folks tuning in with us, especially because it's just a common reality now, right? That almost every single organization experiences a successful ransomware attack at some point in the year. So it then becomes this assume breach idea. And I think one of the cool things to really remember, again, as Alan said, is that backup infrastructures are getting targeted at a really high rate. So by proactively looking at any kind of malicious or even just anomalous activity happening within your backups, that can become an additional signal to your security teams that they can investigate. Again, in that zero trust, assume breach idea, any kind of anomalous activity should get looked at. And the hope would be that by connecting backup and activities around backup to those proactive security protocols, maybe you can catch those bad actors faster, right? Before they've decided to execute on their plans, as a way to contain before that blast radius becomes significant. So that was something that we really enjoyed spending time talking with the 451 team about. Something else that they were really passionate about was talking about the ability to create isolated testing and forensics environments. Now, at Veeam, we've spent, a lot of time talking about data reuse as a really great use case for backup. Your backup is a copy of your production data and it is just sitting there. Yes, it's a great insurance policy, but what else can you do with it? And a lot of organizations are now using backup data as a way to run chaos theory, right? Again, in this principle of assumed breach, how can we be taking a look at what's going on with our environments and run through all of those kind of tabletop programs to figure out where the vulnerabilities might be. So I think that's a really big trend that's coming. And another piece that we talked about with the 451 team is the proliferation of ransomware recovery guarantee programs. If you all remember, if anybody's been tuning in for a long time, we ran a long series on industry insights from our ransomware trends report for 2023. And one of the big trends that was coming up was organizations are having to get creative with how they can pay for the impact of a ransomware attack. And increasingly, insurance companies are getting in the way or flat out not supporting ransomware recovery activities. So we're finding that a lot of data protection vendors, Veeam included, are now offering some kind of ransomware warranty guarantee. Alan, anything else you want to add on this kind of ransomware use case here?
No, I think that's an important aspect, that recovery guarantee goes beyond just paying the ransom or securing the insurance and whatnot. That program should be more comprehensive. It should be proactive. There should be a lot of education, a lot of preparation, and having a partner that goes along with you in the times of troubles is, I think, paramount. Insurance is only as good as when it hits the fan, and you need that partner next to you. So it's paramount that you find that in advance and prepare yourself with the proper organization that you have. So I think it's very important that you consider those aspects of what is their support plan, how well are they prepared, how well are they supportive. Check the background. What is their experience from other customers? Because when you're in disaster mode, you need a strong partner in that area.
Absolutely, you really do, and I think that's something that, as we look to this particular kind of disaster, there are unique aspects of that need to be accounted for, and this is one of many. How are you going to pay for that end result, whether it be deciding to pay that ransom? And again, check out some of our previous industry insights episodes for some trends and analysis around that piece of it. But then also kind of all the other collateral damage that can come with that. I know we're working with an organization in particular that had a pretty severe ransomware attack. And of course, the Veeam team was kind of scrambled in as part of that initial response plan. But now they are doing the long, arduous journey of having to shore up networking, storage. There was a lot of vulnerabilities that they found as part of that attack. And that takes a lot of time and effort. So again, looking to vendors, like Alan said, who are going to be partners in that effort, I think is really key. So there's obviously lots to say about disasters. Ransomware is kind of shining a spotlight on a particular kind of disaster, but lots to be looking at, especially if you're looking for ways to justify any kind of investment in upgrading your data protection protocols. So with that, we've got one more really exciting kind of set of data and insights to talk about from this report. But before I do that, I want to throw that map up again, because we only showed you the United States. I kind of prematurely had mentioned that we were ready to talk about the map. But now we would love to let everybody know where folks are calling in from. We did add some folks from Florida and Minnesota as well. Thank you all so much for joining us. Again, showing that we are connecting with folks from all over the United States. Super exciting. In Europe, we have some folks joining us from Italy and from Portugal. My dad is going to be in Italy in just a week, and I am incredibly jealous. So thank you all so much for joining us. Down in Africa, we have someone joining us from South Africa. Thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it. I know it's later there for you all. Continue to let us know in the comments where you're joining us from. If we get a few more folks, we'll light that map up one more time. So hopefully we get a chance to do that. But with that, let's go ahead and flip to our final topic here. And I think it's kind of an exciting one, because it's talking a bit more about automations and use cases around AI. So, of course, AI is something that we've talked about several times on the Industry Insights show. Go ahead and check out our previous episode with myself and Anthony Spiteri for more on AI. But in particular, when we were looking at data protection solutions and planning for, again, those kinds of investments and upgrades, we actually looked to a really interesting survey, again, 451 Research, Voice of the Enterprise, but specifically Voice of the Enterprise for DevOps and IT automation. They found that 1 in 5 organizations identify backup and recovery management among their top 3 IT processes that would benefit from automations. And I wanted to highlight this stat in particular because this wasn't us sitting in an echo chamber saying, hey, backup guys, wouldn't it be great if we automated some stuff? But instead, we actually asked the DevOps teams, hey, what within your IT organization would benefit the most? And this really rang true as a very important area of investment for any kind of automations. And again, I'm sure a lot of you all in the audience are dealing with mixed environments where you've got multiple backup solutions in place. Some of them may be quite legacy. So this is yet another team that you could maybe work with to justify any kind of investment in any sort of upgrades, because of course, data protection needs to be brought into the 21st century in some cases. And I think this is a really good justification for that. So Alan, I know one of the first things we talked about before we get to the AI components of it, one of the first things we talked about with the 451 team was looking at data protection tools that provide APIs and other ways to facilitate these kinds of automations. Do you have anything you want to add here on that piece?
Yeah, I think it's high operational costs in general, and this goes to the general aspect of things, and reducing number of skilled staffs. I think clearly show that the whole data protection process has become has to find a way to become easier to maintain and manage in exponentially larger numbers. That includes different environments, the multitude of different setups that you have and different scenarios that you have to back up. So if you're relying on a single individual or small team of people to keep that up, it requires a lot of effort. So automation is definitely a good way that helps you not only create that time saving, but also potentially removes the potential of human error, which in many cases the backup issue may be resulting from a customer's users aspects of human error and intervention that may not be as, maybe it's not always a ransomware attack. Maybe it's someone messed up and needs help for recovery. But it's an aspect of the automation can help remove just another aspect of human error out of the equation. But it should be not extensively utilized as well as a time-saving aspect as well. So hopefully that comes across. And it's very well documented in the report that we've commissioned.
Absolutely. I think that human error piece is so key because we all have some kind of IT horror story about something that was boneheaded that you should have known better, or you have that junior person, myself included. I was junior back in the day, and I remember vividly messing up a database by importing the wrong file to it, and they had to roll back on a version of the database that was several hours old. We lost several transactions within that database, and it was quite a mess. So any opportunity that we have to mitigate risk, right, by reducing the impact of human error, I think is a really important thing to take a look at when you're especially looking at upgrading any kind of solution or tool set. Making your life easier should be top of mind on that front. Now, let's go ahead and get into that hot topic around AI, because I think there are a million use cases for AI. And of course, AI becomes an umbrella for so many other terms. I think you can throw machine learning into the mix here. But in particular, I think proactively identifying vulnerabilities and configuration errors was something that the 451 team was really excited to talk to us about. And this is actually something that Veeam's been doing for quite a while, way before this sort of AI bubble that emerged way back in 2019 in version 11 of Veeam Backup and Replication. We launched a feature that offers remediation recommendations for common misconfigurations. And again, that uses machine learning. Basically, it's a way that you can connect to the knowledge base of tech support. Tech support, of course, is a very common function of any vendor relationship that you'd have. But you are able to actually use the best practices and learnings from all of the other organizations that use that vendor and figure out ways that you can remediate these common issues that organizations are facing. And again, when it comes to backup, it just takes one wrong move before you completely blow an SLA out of the water. So if you can use innovative techniques like AI and ML to get ahead of that next human error or any kind of misconfiguration, I think that's a really great outcome. And then one of the final pieces of this would also be using generative AI. Again, there's an umbrella of what AI can mean, but specifically Gen AI, one of the early use cases that a lot of vendors are launching with is kind of in-product Gen AI tool sets that help with those user experiences. And Alan, I know one of the things we talk about a lot is the kind of groups that are forming around data protection, because back in the day, I think data protection typically sat with one or two folks in the data center, regardless of your organization's size. But now that data is so heterogeneous, living in all different kinds of clouds and apps, the people that are part of that stakeholder group have dramatically increased. And as a result, their knowledge of things that we think are table stakes, going all the way back to that first slide, the 3-2-1 rule. Not everybody knows the 3-2-1 rule, right? We're kind of backup geeks who know it well. So being able to utilize Gen AI in product to educate folks on how to use the product the best, I think is another way that you can reduce not only human error, but also just the fact that we're all busy and we have a million other things going on. You can't remember every best practice or every product capability or how to do something. Having it in product speeds that time up for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's where AI comes in. And when there's a large amount of data, be it from the different sources that you have of backups, you have M365 or Salesforce or network backups or other types of backups that expertise may live in different parts of the organization, or even in terms of a community, that this AI engine or Gen AI kind of knowledge base that you're pulling from can come from different parts within the organization or outside of the organizations. And organizations that go through ransom threats or ransom incidents that they need to share that information, and the vendor also has that intrinsic knowledge that they can bring to their customers, allow this massive piece of information. That AI engine allows you to recover those nuggets of information and apply it to specific cases as suggestions for you to consider. And to your point, that thought, it's an interest for you to continuously revert against, making sure that you're covering all your bases. And people forget about things, and their Post-it notes may not be updated and whatnot in terms of their checklist. So having that engine, that intelligent engine making sure that you're covering all the aspects that are part of your disaster recovery plan, I think is paramount.
Fantastic note to end on. Alan, thank you so much for joining us. We hope that this gave you all something to think about as you're heading into perhaps 2025 planning. Before we wrap for the day, I wanted to actually ask production if we could throw up that map one more time, because I got a note that a few more folks were able to let us know where they were calling in from. And in particular, I want to shout out Gilad, and I'm so sorry if I pronounced your name wrong. I just saw a comment here. Been with Veeam since version 6. That's my longest relationship. Thank you so much for being with us that long. You beat my tenure. I've been here since version 7. So thank you so much for being a longtime Veeam community member. Over in South America, we did have someone joining us from Brazil. Thank you so much for joining us. And then if we also pop over to APAC, we had a few other folks joining us, including someone from Australia, I believe. So if we can pop that map over as well. Thank you so much for joining us. I cannot imagine what time it must be. Obviously, Australia spans a lot of time zones. So thank you so much for joining us at what I'm sure is a very late hour. On Thursday's show for Tech Bites, we have a very special hour-long episode where you will be joined by the best of the best from the product strategy team to showcase what's new in Veeam data platform. Of course, last week, Anthony Spiteri and I talked a bit about kind of some of the top trends that we were addressing with this launch. Now you can see the solution in action. So be sure to join us on Thursday's Tech Bites. We also want to go ahead and invite you to join us to Veeam on Data Resilience Summit. This is our free online event happening October 1st, or for the gentleman joining us from Australia, October 2nd for you. And this is a great opportunity to hear from some incredible guest speakers. We just announced a few of them just the other day, including a really exciting speaker from Palo Alto to help us continue to talk about that security story. We are actually going to be off next week for Industry Insights. The team needs to take a little bit of a much needed break to talk a bit about ramping up for Q4 planning. So we will be off on Tuesday, but of course we'll be back the following Tuesday to join you all for another exciting show. Thank you so much for the time. Thank you so much for joining us from all around the world, and join us on Thursday's Tech Bites episode. Thanks again.